An attack up there, an attack right here, and a continuing crisis because we're godless? Hi, everyone. Glad to have you. I'm Neil Cavuto. We still really don't know why they did it, but we know what happened because of it. Terror. The shooting in Canada's capital city, the hatchet attack in New York City. Yet so many are afraid to call these attacks acts of terror. That itself is kind of frightening. To Ben Stein, Jerry Willis, Sandra Smith, Adam Lashinsky, Charles Payne, Dagan McDowell, Charlie Gasparino are all off this week. Coincidence? You report. Oh, deride. All right, Ben Stein, what do you make of this battle back and forth, tiptoeing around the T word and whether it's terrorism? What do you make of it?
Well, we're tiptoeing around the T word. Someone in Canada said, oh, this wasn't terrorism, this was just a loser who happened to have a rifle. No, it's terrorism, and it's Islamic terrorism. Look, we are not afraid of Lutheran terrorists. We're not afraid of Episcopalian terrorists. We're not afraid of Church of Latter-day Saints terrorists. We are afraid of Islamic terrorists. The great majority of Islamic people are wonderful, law-abiding, great people. But we know there is a large number, a large network of Islamic terrorists. We're afraid to call it that because of political correctness. We're not going to get the focus we need on getting the problem solved until we tell the truth. If we can't tell the truth to ourselves, who can we possibly tell the truth to, and how can we fight a true battle?
You know, Sandra, you do have to wonder when Canada's Prime Minister goes right out and says, terrorist act. That kind of removed the debate, at least up there for me. But this reluctance also means a financial reluctance, because if you don't marshal the right words, chances are you're not marshaling the right proceeds.
That's right.
So what does this goal mean?
In this country, it puts into action the FBI and versus local authorities when we identify something as terrorism. So here you had the Prime Minister identifying this act as terrorism, but yet you heard the reluctancy on the behalf of the United States President to call this terrorism. He went as far as to refer to this as a senseless act of violence, which is one of the biggest problems here, as Ben Stein is eloquently pointing out. How can we combat and end terrorism when we can't even recognize and identify it as such? That's a big problem, Neil.
Jerry.
I completely agree, and I have to tell you, this idea of the senseless act is ridiculous. Usually it's Canada. I married a Canadian. These people are politically correct beyond belief. Half the time I don't even know what anybody's saying over the dinner table because they're not clear. They're not succinct, right?
I mean, with your husband you don't understand?
Occasionally. It happens.
All right.
But I just
that was
wanted
just
to
my
say
marriage.
that... I just wanted to say that the point Mark Stein made, which I thought was so great on your show this week, was that, look, you have to stand up for what you believe in. If you don't believe in anything, you'll fall. If you don't believe in something, you'll fall for anything. And that's the situation we're in right now. We seem to be backpedaling. We don't want to embrace any of our institutions. Nobody wants to wave the flag. That's a mistake.
Adam, what do you think?
I completely disagree with what Ben said, and here's what I believe. This has nothing. Of course, this was an act of terror. So was Timothy McVeigh. So was the Unabomber, who were not Islamists, who didn't practice Islam.
That was a long time ago,
Ben,
for God's sake.
You're making a huge mistake. When, I'll finish and it'll be your turn. When terrorism happens, we condemn it, we fight it, we bring the FBI in, but we do not bring religion into it or call people names.
But you will see a pattern, right, Adam? I mean, you see enough of a pattern, right?
But it is religion.
Yeah,
it is religion.
Sure, Neil. Yes,
it's an Islamic cult attacking America, attacking Western values and Western liberties. It is a religious issue. It's not a senseless act of violence. It is a religious issue. Why can't we tell the truth about this?
I completely disagree with you. These are criminals. We find out who they are, and we go after them hard. And by the way, if they are representing foreign governments or foreign entities, then we deal with it in that way, because that's a way to deal with it. But it does. We, as Americans, we don't lead with a conversation about their religion, because that's not who we are.
Well, but Sandra, I can argue as Americans.
But these people are Islamists. Yeah. I mean, who are the terrorists?
Fine.
Terrorists are not Methodists.
To that point, Sandra, I will say, as Americans, a lot of us are pretty good at math, and a lot of us are pretty good at seeing patterns, and a lot of us have seen a consistency to this, whether the multiple attacks in Canada. Keep in mind, the week started out with jihadists trying to run over two Canadian soldiers, killing one of them. And we've had at least a half a dozen similar incidents in the United States. So we do see enough of a pattern here to say, whether they're lone wolves or what have you, it's coming at the behest of those arguing for just such actions.
Well, I'll point out that Adam didn't reference me as wrong in my statements, which I think means, Adam, that you're agreeing with me in pointing out that the president referred to this as a senseless act of violence. May I remind everybody that this man walked up with a gun to a soldier who was protecting a war memorial, killed him in cold blood, and then ran into Parliament? Adam, the president's not willing to call that terrorism. What is he willing to call terrorism?
I don't get it. I'm with you.
Definition varies between agencies in the United States. I get that, but there's really no objection to that being terrorism.
I totally agree. Of course it's a terrorist act, and if that has certain political ramifications or bureaucratic ramifications about how we deal with it, that's like senseless word games. Of course it's terrorism. I agree with you.
Well, you know what we're missing here, and Ben, maybe you can help me with this. I think we're kind of, splitting hairs here. I mean, for semantics, we're missing reality. And the reality is that, this being a business show, if you're going to commit resources to fight a battle, and you're saying one battle is about just fighting bad guys who are doing bad things versus those whose common theme is a jihadist movement, which seems to be the case in certainly most of the examples we outline, then you're missing the battle for the war.
You're missing the battle altogether if you take this PC line that Adam is taking. Look, when Timothy McVeigh and his friend blew up the building, the federal building, we called them white Aryan terrorists. That's what they were. When people who are Islamic terrorists blow up things and kill people and shoot people, that's what we should call them. So, indeed, we can focus our attention. We cannot pretend that these people are our friends or that this is senseless. Obviously, the great majority of Muslims in the world are perfectly fine people. No one questions that. But there is a hardcore, and it's a large hardcore, which is violently anti-American. Until we recognize that, we are just fooling ourselves and playing games. It may work in San Francisco. It doesn't work in the rest of America.
But, Jerry, you think about it, the resources you're going to marshal then are very different for fighting independent acts of violence, whatever you want to call it, versus a concerted effort on the part of jihadists to bring great harm to the civilized world.
You're absolutely right. You have to be able to communicate. You have to use the real words to explain what you're talking about. Everybody needs to be on the same page. If you're not doing that, if you're politically correct, you couldn't offend anyone. You're not having that conversation. You're not marshaling the troops. You're not getting the answer you need.
All right, I hope you're proud of yourself then, Adam. I don't know how you look at yourself. All right.